Hello, and welcome to the Paul Hopkins podcast. And the atmosphere of these podcasts is like, let's pull up a chair, let's have a coffee, let's talk. And sometimes I'm going to be responding to questions that people have sent in. But it's going to be a conversation, even though it's mostly me talking. That's the atmosphere of it. And it's not a systematic teaching, it's just to inspire you. So while you're sitting down with a coffee, and then I presume you go in and you start cooking, or you're running, or you're doing something else and you're listening to this, let's look at some deep things that can inspire us in our walk in intimacy with God, which is so important in these times, that we make the most of our lives and our walk with God and become intimate with Him. It changes everything about what we do. It fills everything. So let's go a bit deeper today. And I thought what we'd look at today is Revelation chapter 1, verse 9, and use that as a springboard, 9 onwards. And really, let's let John, the revelator, teach us and show us and explain to us how he hears, interacts, sees things from God. Because I think, particularly in this passage, hidden within it, you can see his walk with God and how this works. And it's directly applicable to me and you. Because he says, I, John, your brother, he's in this walk with us and partner. Of course, there's a context to this, and that's really important. And understanding Scripture's really important. And getting the context and the meaning that it would have meant to the original authors is vital. So that's woven into this. So just as a background, so you understand, when he says, I, John, your brother and partner in the tribulation and the kingdom and the patient endurance that are in Jesus, was on the island called Patmos on account of the word of God and the testimony of Jesus. And he says on account of the word of God and testimony of Jesus, because he's been sent to this island, exiled, if you like, because of his preaching and his activities. That's why he's been put on Patmos. And it's an isolated island where he can be locked away, if you like, and not influenced. But even from here, he's able to write, as we see and as we're going to see. But he says he's in the tribulation. And so you might think, is this end time stuff that we're about to experience? When it says tribulation, he's talking about the hard times they're experiencing, which is really the period between Jesus and AD 70, and maybe a bit later, AD 70 when the temple is destroyed, and not long after that, the destruction of Pompeii. So there's this whole period of where persecution against the church really gathers momentum, against this Jewish sect that is, Judaism is an accepted religion, but this sect becomes a problem. And it's a problem for Judaism, and it's a problem for the Roman Empire. And eventually, after AD 70, everything changes because we've lost effectively the center of Jewish religion, and Christianity begins its separate journey from Judaism. But that's just to give you a quick thumbnail of the background. That's what it means when he says the tribulation. And the kingdom that is coming forcefully, because, again, this is not he's not obviously not talking about some far-flung off experience. He's talking about the kingdom that's breaking in, then the rulership of Jesus increasing, and of course the patient endurance, because they're enduring suffering. So that's the background. So then let's see how he can teach us. Imagine that you're on this island with John and learning how he seeks God and being influenced by him, and how he's in the presence of the Lord. And of course, he's on an island and he's a prisoner. So many of us are not going to be able to have the amount of time that he has to seek God. But that's not so important as you might think. It's about the time that you do have and using, and it's about letting that infiltrate your whole life. Verse 10, I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day. He's in the Spirit. And that's a phrase that means he's more aware of his spirit than the surroundings, or that's become his priority. That's he's lost. How has he got here? He's got here, we can assume, by thanksgiving and praise and just being in God's presence, just growing that. And now he proclaims, I was in the Spirit. This is a bit different from the way Paul talks about being in Christ. That's some bigger understanding of who we are in the Spirit of Christ. This is more like towards the ecstatic state. Is saying, I was in the Spirit. My spirit was up. I was aware of his presence. I'm loving him. He's not, you notice, he's not trying to have a vision. He's not trying to have a profound encounter with God that's going to influence the church for a couple of millennia. He's just in the Spirit, in the presence of the Lord. And we could unpack how you get there, and a lot of what I've said in other places explores that. How you develop an attitude of thanksgiving, how you focus on the presence of the Lord, so that he's in that. But he's in that state. He's probably used tongues. He's enjoying God, and it's on the Lord's Day, which of course was the day after the Sabbath, which we've come to call Sunday, but it's the day after the Sabbath where the Lord rose. And he says this, interestingly, and I heard behind me a loud voice like a trumpet. Now, when he says I heard behind me, he's already in the Spirit. He's in a different state than just body aware. So I don't think this means he heard an audible voice. Of course, it could have been an audible voice, but that's not what he's emphasizing here, because he said, I was in the Spirit and I heard. This is the sort of thing where you hear something and you can probably ascertain it wasn't audible to everyone, but to you it was quite clear. And so he's lost in the Lord, and he hears a voice behind him. You notice this spatial awareness as well. Like in the Spirit, you get a different spatial awareness. So why is the voice behind him? Why isn't it in front of him? Why isn't it to his side? That's interesting. It's like it arrests his attention. It's behind him. Now, he's going to turn and see something. Now, is that thing behind him? No. But is that thing behind him? Yes. It's a spirit, in the Spirit spatial awareness. It's not a physical awareness that's just related to these 3-4 dimensions. And yet, it interfaces with that. So his conclusion inside, his guts tell him it's behind him. I hear this voice behind me, a loud voice. So it breaks in. And he's aware of it. This is another way. He hasn't seen anything yet. And we're often so absorbed in what we see with our eyes, and we lock onto that. He's aware of communication from behind him, and this communication is almost certainly not audible, but it's because he's in the Spirit, it's loud enough for him to have to say, I heard a voice, because his emphasis is in his spirit senses. So he turns. So, well, first of all, it's like a trumpet. That's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because if you have a trumpet and a voice, they're not quite the same. But again, he's in another dimension where these things make sense. Was it a trumpet? Yes. Was it a trumpet? No, it was a voice. Yet these things coexist because this is above and beyond the limitations that we experience in the physical realm. So here's this, wah, but it's a voice, and it says to him, you can decode that noise, or you can hear the words. You could describe it both ways. He hears the words, or he hears a trumpet, and this is what he's left with, thinking that it's said. Write what you see in a book and send it to the 7 churches. to Ephesus, and to Smyrna, and to Pergamum, and to Thyatira, and to Sardis, and to Philadelphia, and to Laodicea. As an aside here, you might think, why these specific churches? Where do these churches come from? This is because these are almost certainly churches that he's involved with, that he's eldering, that he's part of influencing. And so they're dear to his heart. And so they wouldn't just be names plucked out of the air. Oh, this church over there, this church there. They're the 7 key churches that he's kind of, I'd use the word overseeing, but that's a whole nother understanding of what leadership is and influence is. But he's connected to these. So then verse 12, then I turned to see the voice that was speaking to me. He turns, first of all. So he engages physically. Of course, this isn't a physical thing, but he engages physically because there's an overlap. So in his turning in his body, he's turning in the other dimension. So his physical turning to give focus is emphasized in the spirit realm, is turning to give focus. So even in that realm, even in the spirit, you have to turn aside to look at things. It's not just all happening in front of you. It's actually happening. It's panoramic. It's all around you. You have to engage. You see things and you go, what's that? And you go into it and explore it. He turns to hear. So this is you praying. This is you lost in the spirit. You're in tongues. You're enjoying the presence of God. And then suddenly you think you hear something and you turn to give it attention and listen to it. Now, of course, if you're growing, you may not get any more as you turn and give it attention. It just more may not be able to break in and get to you, but you begin the process of turning and giving attention. John is developed in this. John is used to this, and he turns and gives it attention. And it starts to fill his heart and mind and his spirit. So I turned to see the voice that was speaking to me, and on turning, as he's moving, something becomes apparent in his vision, that is in his spirit realm vision. Again, it's not physical, but the only way to describe it is physical, and it's above physical. So those are appropriate words to describe it as well. He sees 7 golden lampstands. That's, if you like, 7 golden burning flames, torches, that would be giving light. That's the purpose of a lampstand. It's not a cute little decorative thing. It's to give light to an area. And in the midst of the lampstands, one like a son of man, clothed with a long robe and a golden sash around his chest. And of course, John is steeped in Old Testament understanding because that's his culture. That's what he's grown up with. So this is one like a son of man. It's the same description as in Daniel. He sees this figure, and as he assesses, go, wow, that's like the son of man, as Daniel describes. Now he knows Jesus. He's been physically with Jesus. So this isn't Jesus appearing as Jesus in flesh, like maybe when he walked in the room and Thomas said, whoa, you're real. No, this is a different manifestation. He's appearing as the Son of Man, clothed with a long robe and a golden sash around his chest. Now, that's impacting for John. This arrests him, and he's caught in the details. So you can imagine, this is how he would teach us, I guess, if he was sitting down and explaining this. He would say, I've turned, I've given it focus, and now I look at what I'm seeing. And he's allowing it to fill his vision. So it would probably become increasingly overwhelming for him. It would start as being surprised by the voice, turning to it. He sees something, and it kind of gets bigger for him. It impacts him more. And he's staring at the detail and noticing the detail. The more you stare at something and look at something that you're experiencing. So there you are. You're washing up and you're singing in tongues, and you suddenly think you hear your name called, Paul. Obviously, it's your name, not my name. But I would hear Paul, and I turn. Now, I might turn my head while I'm washing up, but I also might just turn because I'm washing up. And that is turning my spirit. And I turn to look at it as if to go, yes, I'm not saying that, but like, that's my name. And I'm waiting for more detail. And I let that thing that drew my attention grow bigger by focusing on it, by becoming aware of it, by resting in it, by turning off the doubts, if you like, by stepping out, by physically turning. I step out of just physical awareness into awareness of this thing that's happening to me, so that it fills my heart and imagination. And I start then to notice detail, which I then focus on those details, so this thing increases. And this is what John is experiencing. He's got a golden sash around his chest. The hairs of his head were white, like white wool, like snow. You can see almost see the expansion of it. The hairs of his head were white. I noticed his hairs on his head, they were white. It was like white wool. It's like, wow. And even brighter, like snow. It's filling him. It's filling his spiritual visuality. And then I noticed his eyes. And his eyes, I mean, how to describe those eyes? Whoa, they were like flames of fire. I mean, are they flames of fire? No, but are they flames of fire? Yes, it's like, that's what I see. I don't just see eyes. I see eyes, flames of fire, eyes, flames of fire. He's caught in the detail and it's expanding. Now, me washing up and hearing my name and turning and seeing the details of something, I can easily snap out of it. This is the practice of drawing close to God, of falling in, of leaning in to that experience, so it grows, so it gets bigger. And he's doing that here. His feet were like burnished bronze, refined in a furnace. Now, this is all reminiscent of Old Testament language, of Daniel's description and others' descriptions. But it's not like he would be doing, some would say, oh, this is John constructing a clever letter. No, I'd say to you, he's having an experience. And he's using the language that he knows and he has. And he's describing it. He's not trying to make a theological point by saying it's his feet were like burnished bronze. Of course, that is a theological point, but the theological point comes out of the spiritual reality that he's seeing. Wow, look, his feet, burnished bronze. They're like shine. They're like buffed up, shining, on fire, almost bronze, refined, absolutely pure. He's struck by the purity, refined in a furnace. It's like, wow, that went through a furnace. He's aware that bronze, to be that pure, must have gone through a furnace. What is that? He's not calculating this. He's discovering it step by step as he falls in. And his voice was like the roar of many waters. Now, that's like the trumpet thing. Is it the roar of many waters or a voice? Yes, both. And both are appropriate. And in that realm, they are one, yet you can identify them separately. His voice is speaking, but it's a roar of many waters. Of course, we could expand on that and look at what hearing the roar of many waters might mean, but this is what he's experiencing, like this roar of waters as he's speaking. So you can feel the effect that this is having on John. He's being awed by it, overwhelmed by it. As we step into something, we allow it to go from being something small we've noticed to focusing on it and growing, and allowing it, if we can, allowing it to become panoramic all around us, and we're immersed in it. So I'm no longer focused on my physicality here in this place. I'm lost in the three-dimensional aspect of the other place that I'm in my spirit. Obviously, it's beyond 3 dimensions, but I'm trying to describe it. I'm there, and you stay there as long as you're able. Now, for most of us, and for John, no doubt, when he's first going into these things, you're there for a short fraction and an out, and even that short fraction is impacting. You remember a lot. It's like You've been shown a picture, and as you go back over it, you can remember more detail from your memory of it. That's how this thing begins. Then he's learning to stay, interact, go deep, and not come out through doubt and unbelief. And he's seeing even more detail in his right hand. See how you can see how, although this would be happening rapidly, he's staying in, he's going deeper. In his right hand, he held 7 stars. Now we know John would automatically, for John, stars would be loaded with meaning. That's pregnant with meaning. But he's seeing it as stars. And to him, those stars would be what he understands stars to be from his understanding of the Old Testament, his encounter with God in the Old Testament, his encounter with God now. It's rich. So there's me trying to imagine Alpha Centauri in his hand. That's not how it is. It's richer than that. That he has to describe. Well, the stars were in his hand. It would mean more like the lampstand. The fiery lampstand would mean more, because you can immediately make that connection with the tabernacle. There was a lampstand there. It's not just, and that wasn't there just to give light, physical light, so the priest didn't fall over. It's speaking of many things: the Spirit, fire, the presence of the Lord. So he's filled with these things, and from his mouth came a sharp, 2-edged sword. Now, that's a crazy image, but that's the way this thing works. It was a mouth, sharp 2-edged sword. It was a mouth, sharp 2-edged sword. And of course that's something about how his spoken word works and cuts. And I'm trying to describe it by flattening it into 2 dimensions. But in that place, it would be a mouth, sharp 2-edged sword. That'd be the only way to describe it for John, because of his understanding of a 2-edged sword and his understanding of a mouth. So that's what he's seeing. And his face was like the sun shining in full strength. Now you can see here if you're going to flatten this completely and into physicality, you say, well, that's impossible. He couldn't be looking at the sun in full strength. But in that place, you can. So he's looking, and it's a face, and then it's so bright I can't look at it, but it's a face, but I can't look at it. And he's lost in that. So he's having all of this has happened in a moment, in the blink of an eye. And he's captured it later in writing. But he will have engaged with all these things in that moment. That's what happens while you're running, and you'll suddenly hear your name called, and you're somewhere else, and you see a load of stuff, and you get it. You're pregnant with it. But if someone asks you what you've experienced, you take a while to explain it. And he's given it detail. And he responds, when I saw him, I fell at his feet as though dead. Now, he fell. You can see that he's overwhelmed, and his senses are given over to this so much that it actually physically affects him. And he, if you like, he faints, he falls, he collapses. And again, this is like, he would be, as he's writing this, recollecting this experience, he'll be writing it aware of Daniel experiencing their falling down dead in front of Gabriel. He'll be aware of that. So it's kind of hinting and connected to that. But his experience at the time will be like, oh, and collapse, because he's given over to it, he's overwhelmed. And that's how this can happen. You could be washing up, you hear your name, you give yourself more to it, you start to see more detail. You might find that you go weak-kneed and you're having to hold yourself at the sink as you're absorbed in what you're experiencing, or you break into joyful laughter that sort of makes no sense physically. No one told you a joke, but what you're seeing is overwhelming you with joy. He's now, his senses, his physicality, his body is responding to what he's seeing in the spirit. So his whole shift. So normally our senses respond to what our body's sensations and the environment around us. His whole focus and senses have shifted to being absorbed in the spirit. You see how that's possible? when you encounter God. Now he's moved by what is going on there, just as we can be praying for a situation as we turn into God and get overwhelmed by what he's doing in the situation and how he's involved with it, that compassion rises up within us, that you think that's impossible for you in the physical because it's not there with you, but you're engaged with it. But he laid his right hand on me. So he now experienced, again, he's not, this is happening to him. He's not predicting what will happen, but sort of in a rapid fashion, he would then feel the hand on his right hand. You notice his right hand on him. It's like was his right hand, was there a physical right hand on him? No, but was there a physical right hand on him? Yes, physical in the spirit. It's really there. It's not mere imagination, as we might call it. It's true imagination. And now it's affecting his senses. So his shoulder or back, whatever, is, if you like, experiencing that touch or replicating that touch as if it was physical, because it is so real in the spirit to him that it's the impact on his senses is going the other way from the spirit to the physical. And he says, "Fear not, I'm the first and the last." So that tells us the falling down dead. There's fear, there's dread, there's overwhelming. And that's a common thing I like to say, that these overwhelming things can be fearful. They bring a reaction that if you look at what's happening in your body, you'd have to describe it as fear. And so in some senses, fear isn't a bad thing. Although Jesus, or the Christ, the Son of Man, says, "Fear not, for I'm the first and the last," and his command is "fear not," which wouldn't have been a rebuke. It would just release this, fear not. It's like fear would fade. It's like Christ is aware this is overwhelming for John. Even John, who's walked with Jesus and experienced so much, there's now this wave of, don't fear. So that fear, that physical response, is the entrance to something deeper. You need then a wave of calm to come from that place and from him to you. Fear not. But the initial trembling and response and like, which is a natural response to being involved with something you cannot control, that you don't understand, and therefore you think could damage you, or is just too much for you and harm you. Your physicality will respond that way. And that's good, because your physicality is realizing you're encountering something that's beyond you. As I've said in many times, that's why I like praying in the dark, in the middle of the night, when the senses are heightened, where sometimes you can feel afraid, because that's the door where you choose to go through and allow the wave of shalom, fear not, to come on you. And you're left with, you've gone through the gate, you're left with your senses attuned, shaved, exposed, your nerve endings exposed to the heavenly realms. Because having your nerve endings exposed is a frightening feeling. But when you then realize his covering around you, is like, it's okay to be in this place and with this experience. Fear not, I'm the first and the last, the living one. I died, and behold, I am alive forevermore, and I have the keys of death and Hades. Write, therefore, the things that you've seen, those that are, and those that are to take place after this. Now, that's interesting. That tells you the chronology of this, that we're coming in to this experience, if you like, halfway, because John, according to this, John has already seen some things. So this is his introductory statement. he's pulled out one experience that he's had as a frame for what is to come, and it isn't necessarily all chronological. But you do notice that things that are and that are to take place after this, and the Greek there is about soon to take place, because that's what's important to John and his hearers, is this time of tribulation they're in, where Jesus has prophesied the destruction of the temple would come. And they're looking to what God is doing in the middle of this as their brothers and sisters are dying, being martyred. They need help in that environment, and that's what the main body of this revelation is about. And John is realizing the importance of this to give to his brothers and sisters and to anyone else who'll hear, because it will give strength to the heart for what they're facing and what they will face. But he has the keys of death and Hades, and that is, death, as a bit of an aside here, but death, if you like, it's linking it to Hades, which isn't, Hades is not necessarily a realm of evil. It's the Greek word that will be used in place of the Hebrew Sheol, the grave. It's the place, the state you are in after you die. And Jesus came to destroy death. That is, destroy the place you're held when you die. And he holds now the keys to death and Hades. And here's the good news, is that now you no longer die. That is, you no longer go to the place of waiting that the New Testament writers called Hades, using Greek understanding, but it's come off the Hebrew understanding, Sheol. You no longer go to that dark waiting place, because Christ, the Son of Man, has the keys. So you don't see that waiting place anymore. You're straight with him, which is so important for these guys who are watching their brothers and sisters die. Say, hey, you've got the keys. They don't just go to a dark, pointless waiting place. They're with him. Wow. So you can see wrapped within that loads of, it's like you can walk with John through that experience, through that encounter, and draw it into your life. Just allow, and you might want to listen to this again, you might want to read the passage again, and allow the reality of that visionary physicality that John is describing to be present around you as you read it slowly. And it almost like you invite your senses to focus on that. Now, I'm not seeking a visionary encounter first. I'm seeking him, I'm worshipping him, and I will be drawn into visionary encounters. And this way that John is describing is just the way that you see in the Old Testament prophets throughout, that they learned to be in the Spirit. That is, their senses attuned to the other place, if you like. Let's call it the other place, rather than this place. To home, rather than this temporary home. And in that state, as they're enjoying that state, that's when things can open up. That's where things become spiritually auditory, spiritually visual, spiritually physical. And you step through the membrane of Western doubt and this you're just imagining this. No, I am just imagining it, because that is the key that takes me in to the reality of that imagination. I go there. I am there. It's around me. So even now, as you're listening to this, we can choose to expand our consciousness of that realm just by hearing that and embracing that. It's like you allow, instead of just being locked into your body, you allow your awareness to expand beyond that. And it's not that you're coming out of your body, but you're coming out of your body. It's in another place where you already are, where you go to, but you already are. We're there. And we're seeing and hearing and feeling much. It's just not breaking through to our senses yet. So I'm learning, and I'm gently taking my soul and body and saying, let's be in spirit. Let's be in spirit. Let's be in spirit.